How to conduct effective job interviews. So you've got a candidate ready to be interviewed online. The process of interviewing someone in a virtual setting is different to one of face-to-face. So here are some practical tips to help. Before you start your interview, here are 5 practical considerations for you to address. These may seem incredibly obvious, but believe it or not, they can also often get overlooked. Number 1, do a basic tech check. Just check that everything's working okay. Number 2, make sure that you've got adequate lighting. It can be really off-putting for your interviewee if they can't see you properly. Number 3, check your audio. Be sure that your interviewee can hear you clearly and that you can hear them. Use an appropriate background so that it's not a distraction during the interview. Ideally, a background that's as clutter-free as possible. I recommend using a real background over a virtual background because virtual backgrounds can get a bit glitchy, and this too can be a distraction in the interview. Finally, avoid interruptions during your interview, whether that's because your phone goes off or you get an email or someone walks into your office. Try to avoid these types of interruptions by letting people know that you're conducting an interview. Create a relaxed environment. Going to an interview can be a really nerve-wracking thing for people, but being interviewed virtually can feel even more nerve-wracking and can seem very intimidating to some. One of the best ways to create a relaxed environment is to start building rapport with your interviewee right from the start. You can have some relaxed conversation at the beginning, maybe an icebreaker, just to help them to feel more relaxed. Use body language, smile, make eye contact. Help them to feel relaxed by creating as natural an environment as possible, even though you're in a virtual setup. Building rapport in virtual interviews is much harder than face-to-face interviews, and what can really help is good eye contact. Eye contact in a virtual setting means looking into the camera. But that doesn't mean looking into the camera all the time. It's a balance between looking into the camera and looking down at the screen to check out the facial expressions of your interviewee to see how they're getting along. Effective questioning. The questions that you ask in the interview is an essential part of the interview process. So think about those questions carefully. What types of questions do you need to ask? How are you going to ask those questions? And which questions are most relevant to the job? And remember that your interview is a two-way process, so be ready to answer any questions your interviewee may have, and it's always good practice to ask them if they have any questions as well. Bear in mind when you question your interviewee that being interviewed online can be much more intimidating than being interviewed in a face-to-face setting. This is because it's much harder to build rapport in an online setting where you don't pick up fully on things like body language and eye contact, which means if you're interviewing someone online, you need to work a little bit harder to build that rapport and create a relaxed environment. To end your interview, it's always good practice to ask if your interviewee has any questions, and don't be afraid to share any feedback that you may have as well. That's it for basic tips on how to interview candidates virtually. So remember to prepare well for the interview, and also to bear in mind that your interviewee may be more nervous because the interview is being conducted online. So this means just doing what you can to create a relaxed environment and building rapport to the best of your ability in this virtual setting.